Good morning, everybody. Hello, welcome to my webinar today. My name's Amanda Chadwick. I'm a senior speaker at Peninsula Business Services, and today is Wednesday, the 6th of November, and it's 11 o'clock. Today's webinar is on flexible working hours and how to deal with those requests. It's not one of the most interesting webinars today, however, it is it's going to be quite factual. What I've had to do, because it is a factual webinar, is to include a lot of notes on the slides. And that's because I don't want you to write loads of notes down while I'm speaking to you. What you can do then is you can actually the slides will be sent to you at your request, or you can download them and revisit the recording later on today on YouTube on our channel, where lots of our other recordings are there. So today's webinar is on flexible working. Slides have got lots of notes in them, and we're going to talk through it and the processes. So why do we have flexible working? Well, employers are looking at all different ways of working and getting the most out of their employees. And what you're going to get now is, remember the olden days when your friends used to work for the council, or you knew somebody who worked for the fire or the police or a civil servant? They'd stay in the job for years and years and years, and they'd retire. So they'd leave school, go into the job, and then never leave until they were 60 and now 65. And that's what used to happen. And the reason for that was because of commitment, because of the perks and benefits, because of the pensions. And now what we've got that happening within the private sector. So we're going to have people that work for us, are committed to us, that have the buy-in within the company, and they help us grow as companies. As a result of that, when we follow people through their working life and through their family life, they are at some point going to request different working hours and flexible working to fit in with their lifestyle. And I have to say to you, a happy workforce is a very productive and committed workforce. So I would like to adapt and help people as they go along. What we've also got is employers exhausting other ways of working, and not just thinking that a secretary, for example, could do a job 9 to 5, but it might actually suit coming in after 5 and working an evening shift because they can get more work done without being interrupted. So we've got lots of people exhausting and looking at different areas of work, and I think it's about thinking differently when it comes to work as well. So we're looking at all different ways of working and getting the most out of our employees. The purpose of flexible working is to enable the employee to meet their caring responsibilities. This is not about preferring to work a shorter week. Look at what the nature of the request is and what it will achieve. Do they need to start later or finish earlier because of the opening times of schools or childcare? And for goodness sake, as a mother of 4 children, I tell you what, childcare is astronomical. I'm so glad that my children are just in ordinary school now, because it costs so much money. Do they need to finish early or not travel on certain days in order to get someone to medical appointments? Do they need to reduce the number of days they work because of the limited availability of other care providers? Think carefully about what it is the employee wishes to change and consider. And if this is a request you can accommodate, have a look at it. Are there alternative ways of meeting the employee's needs, such as changing roles? Discuss the different options with your employee to see if you can find a solution that meets both your requirements. And as I keep saying at all my webinars, it's not about the credit crunch anymore. It's all about growth. People are growing as companies, and I sure as hell want to keep my staff and invest into them. So don't see this as a negative thing. Don't think this is going to really impact on your business. You know, the media make a real meal out of family working, flexible rights and parental leave. Truly, if you've got a great member of staff, they work hard for you, and they work so hard, and they say to you, could I just change my shifts? I'm sure that you would be committed in helping them make that move. So, benefits to the employer. You retain experienced, skilled employees for whom full-time working has become a more difficult or impossible option. You get a broader local pool of potential employees who are available at different times of the day or for part-time working. They're more motivated and a loyal workforce. Employees who have been working hours tailored to suit them are more likely to want to stay with you, and more likely to actually, really push the boundaries and help you out if you need that. And remember, if you've got, say, for example, 2 people job sharing, one's off sick, the other one usually can step up the mark and cover, because they can get help just for that few days all week when somebody's off sick. It's an opportunity to tailor the number of staff you have at work or any time to meet the demands of your business and customers. For example, fewer staff over a longer operating period. I experienced condensed hours probably in the 1990, 1989 when they first started to introduce them, and I found them amazing. 4 days on, 3 days on, 3 days on, 4 days off. Brilliant, because you seem to get a really great holidays and a longer time off, but you worked it just as hard in the hours that you worked there. Different types of flexible working are part-time working, obviously, and it doesn't have to be those set hours. It might be school hours, it might be different hours, it might be after school. As I said, you might get an admin person who says, I can't work the school hours, but then you say, well, actually, you know, we don't mind you working after 5, because people do. I have to say, I'm a bit of a social butterfly. I like chatting to people. If somebody offers me work in the hours when nobody's in the office, that's great for me because I get work done. Flexible hours, flexi time, job sharing, that's brilliant, because you've got 2 skilled people doing the same job, and then they work with each other as a little team, but also as well they cover for each other. Compressed hours is what I was talking about earlier on. Shift work, term time working, people that just work when the children are in school, and then working from home as well. And, you know, working from home is great. So eligibility, to qualify for the statutory right to request a contract variation, because this is what they're asking you for. The employee must have, 1, at least 26 weeks continuous employment with the employer at the date the application is made. So remember, I've put notes in here so you don't have to write them, and there's lots of information. And remember the date of this presentation. So if you do log on to YouTube or you've kept this in your files, remember today is the Wednesday the 6th of November, so if you're looking at it in, I don't know, 2015, it might be a little bit out of date. So have at least 26 weeks continuous employment with the employer at the date the application is made, and 2, not be an agency worker. There's a little asterisk there, so I'm going to refer to that, or a member of the armed forces. Agency workers who work under a contract of employment with their agency are entitled to request flexible working upon return from a period of parental leave. A request is not permitted under the statutory procedure at any other time. The employed agency worker must also meet all of the following eligibility criteria. So, to qualify for the right to make a request as a parent, the employee must also, 1, be the mother, father, adopter, guardian or foster parent of a child aged 16 or under 18 in the case of a disabled child, or be married to or the civil partner or partner of such a person. Have or expect to have responsibility for the child's upbringing and be making the application to enable them to care for the child, and make the application no later than the date before the child's 17th birthday or 18th birthday in the case of a disabled child. To qualify for the right to make a request as a carer, the employee must also be or expect to be caring for an adult age 18 or over who is, 1, a spouse, a civil partner or partner of the employee, 2, a near relative of the employee, either a parent, guardian, child, sibling, uncle, aunt, grandparent, including in-laws, step-relatives and adoptive relatives. Goodness gracious me, how, you know, the criteria is changing. So, or a person who isn't in either of the above categories but who lives at the same address as the employee. If the employee has made an application under the statutory procedure, no further application under the statutory procedure can be made to the employer before the same employer before the end of a period of 12 months, beginning with the date on which the previous application was made. So, the scope of the request. A qualifying employee is able to apply for changes to hours of work, times of work and or the place of work as between the employee's home and a place of business of the employer. For example, an employee may make a request for annualised hours, compressed hours, flexi time, job sharing, staggered hours, shift or term time working. Where an employer accepts the employer's application, a permanent variation, and remember this, I've highlighted that, of the employee's contract will result unless the employer agrees otherwise. Now, I just want to point out, lots of times when we go into help companies, you know, they've made a variation of somebody's hours, but what they haven't done is they absolutely have not changed the person's statement of main terms, and it's absolutely crucial that you do. And that means changing, for example, holidays if they're prorated. This means that once a change has been made, the regulations do not give the employee the right to revert back to their previous terms and conditions. So, oh, I don't really like what I'm doing now. Can I go back to the way I was? You know, no, you've changed it. It's a permanent variation. However, the regulations do not prevent an employee who has already made an application, whether successfully or not, from making further applications for further variations, provided they are made at least 12 months after the previous application and provided the employee still meets the eligibility conditions. So, the form of the application. An application made under the statutory provisions must be made in writing and state that it is such an application. It must state whether a previous application has been made under this procedure, and if so, when. It must specify the change applied for and the date on which it is proposed the change should become effective. Explain what effect, if any, the employee thinks making the change applied for would have on the employer, and how, in the employer's opinion, any such effect might be dealt with. Explain how the employee meets the conditions in respect of relationship to the child, and it obviously must be dated. So what you've got to remember, which is very, very important, the employee should be made aware that this process may take 12 to 14 weeks to complete, and that if the employer approves their application, the variation in contractual terms is a permanent one, and the employee has no automatic right to change back to their previous pattern of work, unless the application seeks the variation for a specified time period only, and maybe a trial period may be agreed. I think we're flexible, aren't we? So whatever requests, and if it meets your business needs, 12 to 14 weeks does seem a long time. So procedure for dealing with an application. Have a meeting with your employee. A meeting to discuss the application must be held with the employee within 20 days of its receipt, unless the employer notifies the employee in writing of agreement to the variation within that time period. The time and place of the meeting must be convenient to both the employer and employee. Where the individual who would ordinarily consider an application is absent from work, on annual leave or sick leave, on the day on which the application is made, the period referred to above commences on the day the individual returns to work, or 20 days after the application is made, whichever really is the sooner. Notice of decision. Within 14 days after the date of the above meeting, the employer must give the employee written dated notice of decision. Where the employer's decision is to agree to the application, the notice must specify the contract variation agreed to and state the date on which the variation is to take effect. Where the decision is to refuse the application, the notice must state which of the specified grounds for refusal, see my next slide, are considered to apply, with an explanation of why those grounds apply in relation to the application, and set out the appeal procedure. So, specified grounds for refusal of application. An employer may only refuse an application under the statutory provisions on the grounds of one or more of the following. A, the burden of additional costs. It's going to cost me a blooming fortune to make this change, but prove it. B, a detrimental effect on ability to meet customer demand. We've got to get our bread rolls out, and they've got to be out by 7 o'clock in the morning, but the person wants to work after 10. Inability to reorganise work among existing staff. Inability to recruit additional staff. Detrimental impact on quality. Detrimental impact on performance. Insufficiency of work during the periods the employee proposes to work, and planned structural changes, maybe even in the future. So, the procedure for dealing with an application includes the right of appeal. An employee is entitled to appeal against the employer's decision to refuse an application within 14 days after the date on which the notice of decision was given. The notice of appeal must be in writing, setting out the grounds for appeal, and be dated. The employer must hold a meeting with the employee to discuss the appeal within 14 days after the employer's notice was given, unless, within that time period, the employer gives the employee written notification that the original decision has been overturned and specifies the variation which has now been agreed and the date on which it will take effect. If an appeal meeting is held,
The time and place must be convenient to both the employer and employee. Within 14 days after the date of the appeal meeting, the employer must give the employee written dated notice of the decision on the appeal. Where the employer upholds the appeal, the notice must specify the contract variation agreed to and state the date on which it is to take effect. Where the employee dismisses the appeal, the notice must state the grounds for the decision and contain a sufficient explanation as to why those grounds apply. So you can see, as with any procedure, we don't want to lose tribunals. I have put so many notes in here so far for you, because once I've gone off the webinar, you can refer back to your slides. You've got lots of fantastic notes there to use if somebody does request flexible hours and the procedures that you have to deal with. Remember here, there are timescales, there are meetings, and there are requirements by law to adhere to what ACAS say and the code of practice that they adhere to, but also, you know, considering the right of appeal. So, extension of time periods. An employer and an employee may agree to extension of any of the time periods referred to above. Such an agreement must be recorded in writing by the employer and specify what period the extension relates to and what date the extension will end. The agreement must be dated and a copy sent to the employee. It is advisable to get the employee to sign that they agree to the extension. So, always remember during investigations, you know, well, not necessarily investigations, but especially disciplinaries, appeal hearings, people have the right to be accompanied. Consider age here. You know, you can get 16-year-old mums, you can get 15-year-old. Consider the age of the person who's making the request. Consider putting in the handbook it's a fellow employee or trade union official. The employee has a statutory right to be accompanied at the meetings referred to on the previous slide by a single companion who is a worker employed by the same employer as the employee. The companion must be permitted to confer with the employee during the meeting and to address the meeting, but not to answer questions on behalf of the employee. If the employee's chosen companion will not be available at the time proposed for the meeting by the employer and the employee proposes an alternative, mutually convenient time which falls before the end of a period of 7 days, beginning with the first day after the day proposed by the employer. The employer must postpone the meeting to the time proposed by the employee. So it's all about flexibility here, isn't it? We don't really want to offend anybody. We want to work with them and make things happen. And if we are going to refuse because of the grounds I said previously, you know, let's have these meetings, let's do them properly, let's talk to them why. The regulations afford protection against detriment or dismissal on the grounds of exercising or seeking to exercise the right to be accompanied, or accompanying or seeking to accompany an employee pursuant to a request under the regulations. So, withdrawal of an application by an employee. The employee can treat an application as withdrawn under the statutory provisions where the employee A has notified the employer orally or in writing that the application is withdrawn. B, without reasonable cause because, for example, fails to attend a meeting or appeal meeting more than once. Or, without reasonable cause, refuse to provide the employer with information the employer requires in order to assess whether a contract variation should be agreed to. The employer must confirm the withdrawal of the application to the employee in writing unless the employee has already provided written notice of the withdrawal. So remedies for a breach, reasons for a tribunal. The employee may present a complaint to tribunal if the application is refused and none of the specified grounds for refusing apply. 2, the employer's decision to reject the application was based on incorrect facts. Or 3, the employer fails to hold a meeting or fails to notify the employee of a decision in accordance with the procedures on the previous slides. Where a tribunal finds a complaint to be justified, it will make a declaration to that effect and may make an order for the application to be reconsidered. In addition, the tribunal may make an award of a compensation of up to a maximum of 8 weeks' pay, subject to the statutory maximum level of a week's pay. The employee may also present a complaint to tribunal if the employer fails to allow the employee to be accompanied at the meetings as described above. The maximum amount of compensation that can be awarded for breach of this provision is 2 weeks' pay. The time limit for the presentation of a complaint is 3 months from the date on which the application was refused or from the date of the breach if applicable. So remember, we want to avoid a tribunal. We don't want a breach. We want to make sure we get everything spot on. That's why you've got lots of notes today, so you can refer back to it. But it's all about this paper trail. Isn't it so easy when a smaller company, somebody comes and goes, I want to work part-time? We're talking about a variation of contract here, not a simple, I want to work part-time. So we have to document everything. Remember that. Potential legislation changes, just to be aware of this if you're listening to me in 2015, or 2016. We are now in 2013, and the legislation that applies today on the 6th of November is different to what will apply if you're listening next year sometime. The right to request flexible working will be extended to all employees. So you better get used to this procedure and familiarise yourself with it, and the dates and the paper trail. The statutory procedure outlined will be removed, and instead employers will have a duty to deal with requests in a reasonable manner and within a reasonable time period. A statutory code of practice will be published to help employers understand the definition of reasonable. It will also cover handling temporary changes in working patterns. The 26-week qualifying employment period to make a request will remain. ACAS will create additional guidance on the interaction of discrimination legislation and flexible working rights to help employers when prioritising requests based on business need and individual employee circumstances. The expected implementation date for these provisions is 2014 at the earliest. So that is our very formal webinar today on flexible working. I told you I would include lots and lots of notes for you because they're useful. I know you use these slides and you put them away for later, and they're available then when somebody does request variation in their statement of main terms and working hours. I'd like to thank you for listening to me today. You can access these slides and the recording later on today on YouTube. Give me a chance to upload them. And the connection there, the link is in front of you. This is where you do require a pen. It's www.youtube.com/PBS Press Office, and that's the link for any previous webinars, future webinars, and today's webinar as well. I am contactable at amanda@peninsula-uk.com if ever you want somebody to speak at an event that you're having, or you want me to hold a seminar for you on some of the subjects, or you want to attend one of our pension seminars that we're doing, or you would like any editorial writing for a magazine or internet site. If you are a Peninsula client, remember we help you with any variation of contracts. That's what you're paying us for. We insure you for our advice. So if you are a Peninsula client and you know that you have to deal with a flexible working hours request, let us handle it for you. That's what we're there, from letter writing, advert writing, to take you through every step of employment law by putting our arms around you, not literally, but saying that, you're safe and we can help you do it. If you're not a Peninsula client and you would like any help with any aspect of employment law, a critique of your contracts, policies and procedures, then or you just want some free advice, feel free to give us a ring. Write this number down, put it in your diary for future use. Telephone number 0161 836 9576, and remember to quote webinar number 0012 to say that you have been listening to today's webinar. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I hope you didn't get injured last night on bonfire night, and I hope you weren't scared to death last week for Halloween. So, and if that's not good enough, I hope the winds and the weather haven't swept you away. So I hope to speak to you again tomorrow, and I think tomorrow's webinar is on disciplinary procedures, and Fridays is a must-have. It's about Christmas parties. What an interesting one that will be. Thank you very much for listening to me, and speak to you again soon.